I'm recording this in the wee hours of the morning. It is pitch dark outside. And if you know me at all, you know that's probably not so unusual for me. I'm a pretty early riser, but at the moment I am dealing with some pretty severe jet lag where I've been waking up at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. This morning was actually an improvement. I woke up at 4 and I am taking the win. So I woke up at 4 and I decided, you know what, I'm going to record this podcast episode while it is fresh in my mind. And it is actually super related to this chaotic schedule that I am on right now, which is I just got back from 2 weeks in Israel, hence the jet lag. And so much about this trip did not go as planned. There were so many things that kind of got thrown at us, so many monkey wrenches, and there was a lot of beautiful creativity and spontaneity and connection that came out of that. But as a type A control freak, that is really, really tough for me. And I have a feeling many of you listening can relate to that. So I figured today would be a good little deep dive into kind of the lessons that can come from when things do not go to plan and leaning into that. So let's get into it. Hey, beautiful human. You're listening to Bold Women in Business, the show where strategy meets soul in marketing, branding, and business growth. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, messaging and branding strategist, content queen, and compulsive meaning maker. Every week, I'll help you ditch the cookie cutter playbook and build a brand that actually sounds like you, sells like hell, and feels so damn good to show up for. Let's get bold. So before I get into the trip itself, which was amazing. And even though things didn't go as planned, there were so many incredible things that came out of this trip. But before I get into that, I want to talk about this concept of control because so many of us as female entrepreneurs struggle with this. And I struggle with this so much, like so much. I am super type A. And I think so many of you listening probably are too, where, we love this time of year, right? New Year's. This is like so good because we can sit down and we can make our plan and we can have all these goals and aspirations. And I'm not actually much of a New Year's resolutions person, but I do love mapping out goals. I do love making a plan. I do love all of that, right? Checking the boxes. I love reflecting back on last year and, oh my God, looking at the spreadsheets and seeing like where things went right and what could I manipulate better this year? Like, I love this. Tell me if you relate to that too, because this is a really, really common thing. But as you probably have learned the hard way, just as I have learned the hard way, when we try to hold on to control, and so many of us choose the entrepreneurial path specifically because we want to grasp at whatever type of control we can, what we learn the hard way is that we can't control everything. Things do not always go as planned. And even when things are going well, they aren't usually going the way that we thought that they would because there are so many variables and so many things out of our control. And most things are out of our control, truly. We have control over our actions, but the outcomes are almost never within our control. Our actions influence those outcomes for sure. All I'm doing here is encouraging actions that can influence outcomes, right? If that weren't the case, like I would shut down my business tomorrow. And so we learn this the hard way, right? We learn it the hard way over and over and over again. And what I have learned, or what I am trying to learn, because it's a constant work in progress, we are humans constantly learning and constantly growing. We should be constantly learning, constantly growing. The thing that I have learned or I'm trying to learn is that when things happen out of our control and when things don't go to plan, it's actually a really beautiful opportunity. And I don't always remember this in the moment, although I'm getting better at that. But the beautiful thing that comes forth when we allow ourselves to lean into the lessons that are being given to us, like truly, when things don't go to plan, we are being given a lesson on a silver platter. We are being given an opportunity for growth. And if we squander that, that's such a shame. Like it's really, really sad if we squander that. So I'm trying to lean into that. And this trip to Israel was like the prime opportunity for that. Let me give a little bit of context. This trip was in the works for a long, long time. So my husband Svi and I both have a ton of family in Israel. And as you probably know, it's been pretty rough over there the last couple of years. And as illogical as it sounds, as soon as the war broke out, all I wanted to do was be there, like in my core. All I wanted to do was be there and be with my people, be with my family, be with my friends, be in the land that I am connected to. But it just didn't happen. Like tickets were crazy, flights were constantly being canceled and grounded. It just was crazy. And getting there during the war was really, really, really tough and just didn't happen. And, on some level, I'm probably grateful that I wasn't dealing with like running to bomb shelters and all of that. But I just like needed to be there, viscerally needed to be there. And we hadn't been there since January of 2023. So 3 years ago and well before the war had started. So we just had a lot of people that I had not seen in so long. And we felt like this need to be there. We've also always had this plan to move there eventually. And we have really kind of accelerated that plan. And we are hoping to move there in the next couple of years. A lot of things happening in the world and in the US have accelerated that plan, to be honest. So we approached this trip as kind of a mini pilot trip where we went for 2 weeks and we wanted to kind of get a sense of like, what would it be like to live here? Now, obviously, you can't really get that sense in 2 weeks, but we went and checked out a couple of places that might be good places for us to consider living. Svi did some networking while we were there to try to, start lining up work. We met with a million people and just reconnected on such a deep level. And so this trip had been in the works for so long and it held a lot of meaning, but also a lot of weight. I went into this trip so excited, but also really, really nervous and feeling a lot of pressure to make sure that we came out of this trip with some clear answers, which is silly, right? Like, why would I put that pressure on myself? Why would I put that pressure on this trip? We were going to come away with whatever information we were going to come away with. We're also not planning on moving like tomorrow, so we have time. But I went into it with a lot of pressure. And as my type A control freak self, I was like, I'm going to plan everything and everything's going to be perfect. And we're going to figure this out and all of that. Well, that's not how things go. So we wound up having some unexpected monkey wrenches thrown at us, one of which was just the weather. It's winter, and in the winter in Israel, it is rainy, and it's not as cold as New York by any means, but it is rainy. And when it rains there, like the country kind of shuts down. Like, there's flooding and the roads are not equipped for a ton of rain and people don't know how to drive in the rain and everything kind of shuts down. It's also just super gloomy and you just kind of want to hibernate. We were staying in an Airbnb that was not great. Honestly, it just wasn't great. The beds were comfortable, but otherwise it was cold. It was dark. It was not a place that we wanted to like spend a lot of time. And thankfully we didn't have to spend a lot of time there because we had a lot of other stuff going on, but it just was hard to kind of find our rhythm while we were there. The first week we actually got really lucky with the weather, but the second week was just tough. It was tough. And because of the weather, some of our plans got shifted. And so we had planned really one main day of touring. The rest of the time we were really seeing people, we were seeing friends and family, and Svi was doing networking and we were really busy the whole time, but we had one day that we had planned out to do some touring and do something fun. So we had planned this whole day with a tour guide. We were supposed to do like a full day hike, which is always our preferred way of traveling. We always just love hiking. And, our hiking boots took up a ton of room in our luggage and we were so excited. And then he texted me the morning of our tour and said, I'm so sorry, but there is flash flooding in the Judean desert where we were planning on going hiking and we can't go hiking. So he planned this whole alternative itinerary. And at the beginning of the day, I was really bummed because we were doing things that were like not active, and we are such active people. And we were going to a museum and we were going to another museum, and we were kind of like doing things that are not really my forte per se. I'm not such a museum person, but actually they were pretty interesting, to be honest. And then we did jeeping. We were in like an enclosed jeep, so we were able to do that despite the rain. And the jeeping experience was actually so cool because it's something that I wouldn't have done if it was a beautiful day. Honestly, I wouldn't have done it because it's not active, right? You're sitting in a vehicle and you're just kind of like bumping around, and it wasn't necessarily the thing that I would have chosen to do. But because of the weather, because we were kind of forced out of our original plan, we wound up doing this jeeping activity, and we were taken into these hills that we never would have been able to explore if we had just been hiking. These are not trails that are accessible by foot. So we wound up seeing these views and seeing this part of the country that we just never would have been able to see otherwise. And it was such an incredible experience. And I felt so grateful that we were able to have that experience. And even though we were a little bit forced into that experience, it wasn't our first choice, it actually wound up being so special and so meaningful. The other thing that happened that day is we had this really spontaneous tour of the Shuk, which is the open food market. Pretty much every country in the Middle East has these open food markets where vendors are selling fruits and vegetables and selling their wares, and it's chaos, and it's such a cool experience. Like, you have to know what you're going in for because it is a sensory overload, truthfully. But I've been there so many times. I'm used to it. I know what to expect. Svi has a childhood friend who lives there, and he was going to get together with him. We were expecting him to go hang out with this friend by himself, and I was going to go back to the apartment and do some work. And his friend said, "Oh, should we like have our wives join us?" So we're like, "Sure, let's do it." And his wife kind of does these spontaneous tours of the Shuk. One of the cool things there is that there's just so many types of cuisine there, like international beyond belief. There's every type of cuisine there. And so she just took us around on this impromptu food tour to all different international cuisines. And she just knew her way around and got us these little bites at like, I don't know, 10 different places. We had Yemenite and Iraqi and Italian and Japanese and like everything you can imagine. And we would not have known how to like explore that on our own. Mind you, it is still raining. Like, it's still fully raining, and we got soaked through, and it wound up being such a cool experience because the Shuk at night totally changes character. So during the day, it's bustling, and you have people selling their wares and trying to bargain with you and yelling at you, and you have just like tons of stands with fruits and vegetables and all of this stuff. And we were there kind of at this transition point where it transitioned from day to night. And at night, all the stands kind of shut down, and you have just some restaurants. They're not really sit-down restaurants. They're just like places where you can get bites to eat. All of those open up or become more bustling. And then there's also a bunch of bars that open up. And so the flavor shifts completely, where now there's music and people are dancing in the streets, and there's this guy with like a cup of beer on his head and he's dancing, and like it just was like a totally different experience. And it was this magical thing that my instinct is almost never to say yes to unplanned things. Like, this is something that I am working on. I'm working on like saying yes more, but my instinct is always going to be to say no. If I do not have advanced notice that something is happening, like, I'm going to say no. And my instinct when Svi's friend said, "Let's invite our wives," my instinct was to say no. Like, I don't want to go out in this weather. I just want to like go back to our apartment and curl up and do some work and whatever, right? But I went against that instinct, and I went with the flow a little bit more than is my natural way. And we wound up having this really cool experience. We like discovered and experienced and tasted things that we never would have found on our own. So there's just this magic of saying yes to the unplanned. And so this was a really good reminder to me that there's always magic in saying yes to the unplanned. Quick pause. Can we talk about content for a second? If you're staring at a blank screen more often than you're hitting post, it might be because you're trying to create content that doesn't fit your actual strengths. It's kind of like wearing someone else's jeans. They may look super good on your friend, but you put them on and they are not comfortable and they just aren't doing your butt any favors. That's why I created the Content Marketing Power Type quiz. It's free and it helps you figure out the kind of content you were made to create. The kind of content that feels natural, sustainable, and actually connects with your people in a way that lights you up. In just 45 seconds, or maybe even 30 if you're quick about it, you're going to find out your power type and get custom recommendations to make content feel easier and more effective. Head on over to honeybeebold.com/quiz. That's honeybeebold.com/quiz. Take it and then DM me your result because I kind of need to know. All right, let's dive back into the episode. So the last piece of this trip that did not go as planned, it was honestly a little bit of a shit show, but it worked out okay in the end, spoiler alert, is the morning of our flight, get a notification from Delta that our flight is delayed by 3 hours. Not a huge deal. Our flight originally was supposed to take off fairly early, so we had time now to go get some breakfast, get some coffee, take a walk. It was actually really nice. And the weather was super nice that day. And I was super sad about coming home to New York and the cold, rainy, snowy weather. But that aside, we had this nice slow morning and then we go to the airport and our flight just keeps getting delayed. And then they let us on the plane and we even taxied a bit. And then they just kept coming up with different excuses why we weren't taking off. They kept saying, we're going to take off in 20 minutes. Everyone stay seated. We're taking off in 20 minutes. I can't even tell you how many times they said that. 3.5 hours later, no joke, 3.5 hours later, they say, sorry, we got to cancel the flight. So at this point, from the time we got to the airport until now, it's been 7 hours, 8 hours, something like that. We did not have Wi-Fi this whole time. So I couldn't even use that time on the plane to do anything. It was just dead time. I slept a little, but it was such a frustrating experience. I'm sure you've experienced that because this is ubiquitous now. We've all experienced these travel nightmare days. We get off the plane. We then had to stand in line for passport control for an hour and a half because there's all these people who are not expected to be going through passport control at the same time, along with anyone else who's landed around then. We get through passport control and then have to spend another hour and a half standing in line to speak to Delta to get accommodations for the night. Actually, for 2 nights, because the earliest flight that Delta could get us on was 2 days later. So we needed 2 nights. We did not have our Airbnb anymore. We didn't have our rental car anymore. We didn't have anything. So I needed to stand in line to get accommodations from Delta. That was another hour and a half. We wound up just getting dinner in the airport and then we got to our hotel and lo and behold, the hotel tells us Delta actually only booked us for 1 night. Come back tomorrow. We'll figure it out. So I'm just forget it at this point. This has been the longest day of my life and it has been just this totally unproductive day. It just felt like nothing got done. I, again, as a type A planner, this is a nightmare for me. Nightmare. I can't deal with this. I planned this whole day. I planned all this stuff I was going to get done on the flight. And I had this whole idea and nothing went to plan. What wound up happening is the airline actually put us up in this hotel. The hotel itself was super weird. Kind of reminded me of The Shining. It had these floor to ceiling hot pink walls and literally the carpet was hot pink, the walls were hot pink, the ceiling was hot pink, and then it had this really weird art everywhere. It was dark and dingy, but the rooms themselves were updated, so that was fine. And we actually had a view of the ocean. It was beautiful. And we were right on the boardwalk. So we were able to actually walk around and it actually wound up being really lovely. We had this extra day where we just kind of were able to experience Tel Aviv in a way that I hadn't before. And spoiler, we did wind up getting an extra night in the hotel. So we were okay. Literally 20 minutes before checkout, they finally confirmed we can stay in our room for an extra night and we weren't out on the street. So that was nice. And then when we finally had our flight home, it all went totally smoothly, totally smoothly. But in the midst of all of this, my brain was just going because something happens when things don't go as planned. There's something really magical. And this is a lesson that I am actively learning all the time, is that when things don't follow the exact plan that we had set out, it actually opens up the possibility for a different type of creativity. And so my brain was going this whole time, and I couldn't stop thinking about my Bold Content Collective program. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I mean, it makes sense that I couldn't stop thinking about it because it is this huge thing that is coming up, but something just wasn't sitting right with me. I had put all this work into planning this program. I had recorded all these videos. I had planned all these worksheets. I had this whole plan, and it was such good content, like such good information that I would be sharing with the students in the course, but something was not sitting right with me. All I could think was, if I were a female entrepreneur struggling with my content, struggling with my brand strategy, struggling with all of that, would I be able to absorb this information and get everything that I need from it? And all I kept thinking was, no. Anyone going through this is going to be so overwhelmed that they're not going to be able to complete the homework. They're not going to be able to go through the exercises that are necessary to get them to the answers that they need. And because of that, they're not going to be able to actually create the content that I've promised them they're going to come away from this program with. So something was just not sitting right with me. The gears are going in my brain, and then I have this 12-hour flight home, and I did not want to sleep on that flight because I wanted to get home and avoid jet lag. Haha, I'm recording this at 4 a.m., so that's whatever. I didn't avoid the jet lag, but I did use the first 6 hours of the flight to completely rework this program. What it had been before is we were building strategy and then building content. The problem is that it's really hard to build momentum that way. And also, strategy work is really, really tough. It's really hard. There's a reason that people don't do it, because it's really hard. So instead, what we're doing is we have 2 calls a week, Tuesday and Thursday. The Tuesday call is focused on the strategy work. And what I've done is I have recorded one video, 1 or 2, some weeks there are 2. Basically, I want students to come away with one strategic idea each week. So instead of having this full-blown strategy, they're coming away with one key strategic idea. And then we are working through that together in the Tuesday call. We're doing the homework live, because I don't want people to just be working through a million things on their own when they don't have the time for that. None of us have the time to just focus on extra things, right? You have your work, you have your life, you have your family, you have all this other stuff. It's just not going to happen. So in the Tuesday call, we are working through that strategy together. And then in the Thursday call, we are creating content that is directly related to the strategic idea that we just went through. So we're taking it from the theoretical to the practical. We're implementing right away. And so from week 1, we are starting to create content. And then that content is just going to get better and better and better as we go, because we're building this strategic foundation. So over the course of 8 weeks, we're building strategy alongside content, which is super, super, super cool. What winds up happening is there isn't extra time. Most of the work is happening in the context of those 2 calls. So it's an hour and 15 minutes on Tuesday, an hour and 15 minutes on Thursday, 2.5 hours. Maybe you'll have an extra, 10 minutes to watch a video, and maybe there will be a little bit of extra time. Let's just say it's 3 hours total. You have 3 hours total of work, which is really, really doable for most people. That is really doable. You can fit that in. You can just scroll a little less on Instagram, but you can fit that in. You're coming away with a ton of content while coming away with a really clear understanding of your brand strategy, your content strategy, your messaging strategy. So all of that is coming out of this 8-week container, but in a way that is super, super doable and doesn't feel overwhelming. And that honestly is the thing that I have struggled with when I've taken coaching programs myself, is that they often feel very overwhelming. It just feels like a ton of content and a ton of stuff that I have to do. And I'm already overwhelmed and I already have all this stuff. So I just wanted this to not be overwhelming at all. And I honestly think that I would not have come to this realization if I hadn't had this whole like travel debacle mishap, because I didn't have the headspace before that to allow myself to really explore this. Even though something wasn't sitting right with me the whole time, like the last few weeks, something just hasn't been sitting right with me. But I think that if things had gone completely to plan, I would not have had the opportunity to really sit with this and think about, how do I want to improve this? And how do I want to make this more doable? And then I wound up having this flight that was a much better time. Honestly, like the timing was much better for me to keep myself awake and keep myself engaged and fully rework this. The Wi-Fi wound up being actually pretty good. I got really lucky with that. So like there were so many things that had to fall into place. But if things had gone completely to plan, I promise you that I would not have had that like creativity come flooding in. So the big takeaway here, besides for join the Bold Content Collective, if you are listening to this before January 22nd, join the Bold Content Collective because it is going to be so transformative. If you are a female entrepreneur who has struggled with your content, or you struggle to stay consistent, you struggle to make your content actually connect with your audience, so like it's actually working and actually bringing business your way, join. Please join. It's honeybeebold.com/BCC for Bold Content Collective. Grab your spot. As I'm recording this, there are only 6 spots left. By the time this goes live, there might be fewer. So just go grab your spot. I would love to have you in the program. Reach out to me with any questions. That's takeaway number 1. Takeaway number 2 is I want you to think about where in your business or in your life are you gripping too tight? Where are you holding on to control so much that it's not allowing you to really tap into your creative energy? Where are you white knuckling things? Where are you pushing through in a way that doesn't feel aligned for you because you think that you have to follow a specific plan? And what might open up for you if you loosened that hold? So I want to give permission to you and to me that sometimes the best business decisions come when you step away from the spreadsheet, you step away from the plan, and you open your mind to things maybe going a different way than you expected. If this resonated, share it with a friend, share it with someone who you think would learn something important from this, or send me a DM. Let me know what you learned. What is one thing that you've been gripping too tight on that might need some breathing room? Have a wonderful day, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you next week. All right, beautiful human. That's a wrap on this episode of Bold Women in Business. This episode was brought to you by my company, Honey Bee Bold, with music by Shmukulele. But before you go, don't forget to take the Content Marketing Power Type quiz at honeybeebold.com/quiz, because when your content fits your power type, showing up gets way easier and your marketing actually starts working for you. Until next time, stay bold, stay kind, and keep doing it your way.